general with what's going on with the Jordan River.
With what?
With what's going on with the Jordan River.
With what?
With what is happening with the Jordan River. Here, maybe I should. Yeah.
Yeah, you can take that off, and you can.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
We're all. We know the ears and eyes.
It's okay. I totally understand. I went to too many dance clubs when I was in college, so I have problems myself. I was just asking, how many of you are familiar with sort of the general issues that are going on right now with the Jordan River? More or less.
Would one of the issues be, and I don't know if it is that they have such a dry spell there now.
Right.
Can they use any of the water from because like Israel has tremendous fire now. Is the Jordan River available?
Right, this is part of the problem, right, is that there are more droughts that are happening now, and some are saying it's a result of global climate change. So global climate change is exacerbating the issues that are already extant with the Jordan River. What I thought I'd do is there's this great, it's about a 15-minute little clip that describes sort of the overall situation and brings in some of the religious components. So I thought I'd start there and then talk for about 30 minutes, and then we can open up for questions and conversations.
Whitney, would it be easier if I shut the light off, or should I leave that on?
Well, can you see it all right?
Better shut the light off.
Okay.
No problem.
All right.
It meanders towards the lowest place on Earth, through the very cradle of civilization. More recently, the followers of three great faiths have come to believe these waters are holy and that miracles happen here. Now those same believers seem to have turned on the once mighty Jordan River.
When we destroy this, we destroy really a part of ourselves. And that's unacceptable. It's not necessary.
For Jews, the Israelites, led by Joshua, crossed this river to enter the Holy Land. Muslims believe the companions of the Prophet Muhammad are buried here. And for Christians, it's where Jesus came to be cleansed in the river by John the Baptist. But if Jesus walked down here today, well, he'd be shocked by what he'd find, because this is what's become of the once pristine Jordan River. Its waters are just full of muck and filth. But it doesn't start out that way. In its upper reaches in Israel, the Jordan River is everything you'd imagine. A bubbling waterway fed from streams here in Israel and from Syria and Lebanon. My journey begins with a man who knows this river well.
Okay, this is the mighty Jordan. This is the way it should be all the way now. Woo!
Gidon Bromberg was born in Tel Aviv, but grew up in Melbourne. As a teenager, he fought to save the Franklin in Tasmania.
I remember the Franklin shivering from the cold, and there's no shivers here today.
Now, as an environmentalist with Friends of the Earth, he's taken on the biggest challenge of his life: to save a river that's being literally drained, not only by Israel, but by its neighbours, Jordan and Syria.
Many people say that the next war in the Middle East will be over water. It's in fact the demise of the River Jordan, the Dead Sea, that can and should be the impetus to promote cooperation.
The Jordan River takes its first hit here. It's the breadbasket and fruit bowl of northern Israel. Israeli pioneers like Jid Shoshani turned this land from brown to green thanks to irrigation water from the Jordan. He'll tell you it's part of his national mission.
We have to stay here. We cannot develop only Tel Aviv area and the 1, 2, 3 big towns in the middle of Israel. It's have to grow inside. It's have to cover the country.
Jid Shoshani started growing vegetables for the local market more than 40 years ago. Now his sights are set on the export market and his favourite crop, mangoes.
Well, it's madness. It's madness to be growing tropical fruits in the middle of the desert, be it mangoes, avocados, bananas. These are water guzzlers. The Middle East is a natural desert. We cannot be the breadbasket of other continents, of other societies.
But Jid Shoshani says he can grow his mangoes using less water than they need in the tropics, and they're a good little earner.
The mango is close to 5 times more than olives. Now, same quantity of water.
Some of its waters lost to irrigation are still healthy. Jordan feeds the fabled Sea of Galilee. It's here Jesus is said to have walked on water and multiplied the loaves and fishes. On its eastern shores rise the Golan Heights, land conquered from Syria during the 1967 war. The Galilee is Israel's biggest single source of drinking water, a huge reservoir dammed up to quench the thirst of city and farmer alike. This is also where Israelis come to play. If they're worried about a water crisis in this desert nation, they're not showing it here. When the Jordan River emerges from the Galilee's southern shore, it's barely moving. But it still attracts those who hope to follow in the footsteps of Jesus.
I want to do something he did. I want to do something he did and then imitate him, I don't know.
These waters are considered so sacred, the robes the pilgrims have worn to the river will be kept and used as their burial shrouds.
God bless it, you know what I mean? That's why there's just Bible right here.
But most pilgrims don't know this is probably not where Jesus was baptised. It's just that this is the last place on the river where you'd ever want to go near. And just downstream it gets a lot worse.
Well, this is the last stretch of the clean waters of the River Jordan, and they come to a complete halt here on this earthen dam.
On the other side of the dam, its banks are filled once more, with a cocktail of salty water diverted from streams around the Sea of Galilee and raw sewage.
This is a little hidden secret, a secret of demise, of disgrace. The destruction of the Jordan River takes place here, where raw sewage is flowing out. It's amazing what we've done in cooperation to destroy a river that's holy to half of humanity.
With its transfusion of putrid salt and sewage, the river heads through farmland, but it's now too foul to be of any use to anyone. The Jordan's fall from grace has, to this point, been humiliating enough, but there's even worse to come. In its moment of need, it becomes a security zone, a no-man's land. The river takes on a precarious new role as the boundary between Israel and the Arab world to the east.
You have to get permission from the Israeli military.
Yeah, I just called the army.
Nirit Bagron was born on a kibbutz on the shores of this river, and she's lived here all her life. The Israeli military allows her to run tours through this historic site.
It's a pretty serious looking gate.
2,000 years ago, the Roman understood that this place exactly this is the place to cross the Jordan River.
The Ottoman Turks also came here to cross the river. The underwater foundations of the bridge they built are now high and dry.
It was a very good base to build a bridge, and you can see
It was also a natural barricade to the invading Arab armies in the War of 1948. But the river has been robbed of its once forbidding force.
I'm really concerned that it will vanish one day. It will be dry. I think it's really dangerous to eat this fish, but they survive, you see. And people come to see and to feel the Jordan River like it looks thousands of years ago. And we ruined it by our hands. And it's really sad.
This is what it's come to. The lifeblood of the Holy Land is now mostly just sewerage and salt water. And it could have petered out right here, end of story. But there's a twist. In its darkest hour, the Jordan River gets a new lease on life, and it comes from the most unlikely source of all places, Israel's sworn enemy, Syria. The much faster flowing Yarmouk River runs out of Syria and into Israel. It's a gift of geography. But there should be much more water to replenish the Jordan. The Yarmouk was once mighty enough to power Israel's first hydroelectric dam. But these days, before it gets anywhere near Israel, much of its water is siphoned off upstream by Syria and Jordan. On the east bank of the river, the Jordanians too are farming for export. These greenhouses grow exotic herbs and vegetables for tables in Europe. Although the Jordan is only 2 kilometres away, farmers couldn't use it even if there was enough water for irrigation.
At the moment, we can see that the higher salinity and other pollutants within that river would actually stop us from using it.
Instead, farmers here rely on water diverted from the Yarmouk before it even reaches the Jordan. Like their Israeli counterparts across the river, they say their businesses and their communities must come first.
I normally get furious by the fact that people are against agriculture, even in Jordan or elsewhere, because it's part of a culture. It's agriculture. It's a culture by itself. And I cannot imagine a country without agriculture. Any country, not only Jordan, any country.
At the lower reaches of the Jordan, the river is in its death throes, and yet this is where it should be at its biblical best. It's where the pilgrims should be dunking, if only it was safe enough to go in.
We are here 400 meters below sea level, but we consider it to be the closest to the heaven. Because when Jesus was baptized, so close from where we are now, the heavens open.
Only the most faithful could still believe in the purifying powers of these waters.
People, millions of people would want to bathe, to be baptized in the place where Jesus was baptized. Today, people that come out of that water are likely to come out with a rash.
It's been a truly torturous journey, but the Jordan has one more twist. It empties its poisonous waters into another Holy Land icon, that wonder of the natural world, the Dead Sea. This is the lowest place on Earth, and only 10% of the water that used to flow from the Jordan now makes it. The Dead Sea too is dropping by a staggering 1 metre every year.
This particular sinkhole enlarged suddenly and swallowed me. And it was...
You fell in?
Yes, I fell in.
Geologist Ellie Raz takes me to what was a tourist campsite near the water's edge. The lowering of the sea level has allowed fresh water to leach salt from the soil, opening up huge sinkholes. The camping ground has literally been swallowed by the earth.
I feel very bad. I feel very bad. Sometimes I'm crying inside of me.
And we can see the terraces on the surface of the exposed ground every year with sea level dropping. We're losing this magnificent body of water. As we kill the river and as we kill the Dead Sea, it's our economies that will lose. And therefore it's the strong grounds, it's the mutual grounds to be working together, Palestinians, Jordanians, Israelis, Syrians, to save the river and to save the Dead Sea.
The Great Jordan Valley has witnessed some of the most important moments in human history. By any measure, this is an inspiring place, but the insatiable hunger and thirst of its modern custodians has all but spelt its doom.
So that kind of gives you an idea of the players involved and some of the environmental issues that are going on. I want to talk a little bit now about, just very briefly about some more of the, I'll just hold it. I want to talk now very briefly about some of the more specifics, just to get an idea, but then to suggest that saving the Jordan River, much like coming up to solutions to the problem of global climate change, if successful, when successful, can be a symbol of hope, right? Rather than what many of us think of when we hear the Middle East, right? When we hear the Middle East, our mind goes, oh no, you know what happened, this sort of thing. It becomes sort of this almost symbol of despair right now, because there's been so much turmoil there, at least since I've ever been alive. So what I want to suggest is that a focus on the Jordan River could be a different way forward, a different way that could turn this area, I think, into a symbol for hope when we're talking about dealing with things like global climate change. And I want to get there through talking about religion and ecology, because I think that this is one way that religions can come together over issues that transcend any religious boundary, any national boundary, this sort of thing. So let me just move forward here. So here's just a map, as you all probably know well. The riparian areas are Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, and Syria. The religions represented, Jewish, Muslim, and even a Christian minority, are there. So the three Abrahamic faiths, this is an important spot, as you know, for all of them. Whoops. Some of the problems, as the movie discussed, is pollution, both from raw sewage and from agricultural waste. So pesticides, herbicides, these sorts of things, leaching into not only the Jordan River, but also the aquifers, the 4 major aquifers of this area. You also have the problem that they discussed of salinization. Again, not only in the Jordan River, but because the aquifers are so low, salt water, especially on the western aquifer, is seeping in to the aquifer, the fresh water. Much of the problem does have to do with diversion of the Jordan for agriculture, which again, this person said, one of the farmers said, why are environmentalists so angry at agriculture? Well, farmers, we have to have this. There's a sense in which a lot of times environmentalists and farmers often go fisticuff because environmentalists come in and say, oh, this is all your fault, and the farmers are like, well, we have to eat, right? This is what we have to do to live. Why are you angry at me? So anything that I'm saying here is not, it recognizes that. And many more environmentalists now are revising their rhetoric and tactics in terms of agriculture, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So just a little quote here. Prior to the diversions 50 years ago, the average amount of water that flowed down the Jordan to the Dead Sea each year was 1.3 billion cubic meters. Today, it's just 50 million to 100 million cubic meters. In summertime, up to half of that flow is untreated sewage from communities in Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority. So, I mean, to sort of add insult to injury, the water is supplemented with wastewater, right? Which allows it to continue its journey. And that's often the only way that it makes it to the Dead Sea. Sometimes it doesn't make it to the Dead Sea anymore, by the way. Just to note, the World Monument Fund has called this an endangered heritage site. So this means that there should be international attention as an endangered World Heritage Site. This means that this should, in terms of the UN, countries, governments should be focusing on this and looking towards preservation or solutions, which the EU, a lot of places have begun to give money to the efforts to save the Jordan River. So again, just to let you know the other sources of water, this is a map of the main aquifers in the area, and so you have the eastern, northeastern, western, and Gaza coastal aquifer. Again, they're having the same sort of problems. Salinization, leaching of sewage and other wastes, agricultural use outstripping the regeneration capacities of the aquifer, and also unequal distribution. As you might guess, the water is not distributed equally to upstream, downstream, or the aquifer water is not distributed equally between groups in the area. Of course, water has become a political sort of source of power in a sense. And again, global climate change is already, some suggest, beginning to exacerbate these issues in terms of more drought, this sort of thing. Of course, everyone will say you can't sort of look at one event and attribute it to global climate change, but nonetheless, we can look at trends, I think, and see that the amount of drought years has increased in the past 20, over the past 150 years of record keeping at least. Okay, so there are a lot of groups that are trying to address this issue. One is the Multilateral Working Group on Water Resources, which was established in 1992. And this includes Jordan, Syria, Israel, Lebanon, and the Palestinian Authority. And their stated goals are identifying the needs for new and additional water resources, identifying potential new and additional water resources and the development thereof, combining their cooperative efforts in the development of new and additional water resources, and enhancing their water supply and increasing the efficiency of its use. You'll notice there's not a lot about conservation or preservation or regenerating the river, but it's mostly focused on identifying new. A large part of it has been focused on desalinization technology, which will help, but it's very expensive. It's very energy intensive. It doesn't do much to reduce carbon emissions because of how energy intensive it is. So I think it's not the only answer, but like most sort of Westerners, we have this idea that technology will save us somehow, often, and so this, of course, is one of the main outcomes of the Multilateral Working Group. They have had limited success as negotiations fall apart and this sort of thing, as you can imagine. just wanted to note a couple of other treaties. The Jordan-Israel Treaty in 1994, one of the Article 6 of the treaty was all on water. So this has been a very important, water has been an important part of all peace treaties from almost the get-go. Article 40 of the Oslo II establishes the Joint Water Committee. And so again, there's there's a recognized need, right, that there has to be multinational, sort of religious, multi-faction collaboration on this issue, because the river transcends any sort of geopolitical boundaries that we might impose upon it. One of the things that I think is interesting is that all of these efforts have focused on security. None of them have any sort of religious language. And I find that really interesting, given the symbolic power of this river. That these trees would just leave sort of religious, any sort of mention of religion out of them at all. And that's what I want to focus on. How can this interreligious dialogue contribute to an environmental movement to save the Jordan River, so to speak? Just a few points on the religious value of the river. Again, as the movie pointed out, it's important for all three Abrahamic faiths, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. It's seen in these faiths as variously the source of life, right? The Tehom in the beginning, it's the watery chaos in Genesis. It's the source of life and birth. All living things are created from it. It's a source of rebirth. It's a source of purity. All of these traditions have ritual cleansings of some sort that use water. Humans also, in each of these three traditions, are seen as stewards, caretakers, or vice-regents. Right? The earth, there is a certain responsibility that humans have on the planet, and that is to take care of this creation, which is borrowed either from God or future generations, depending on which text you read, which religion you ask. But the idea that humans are not owners, can't do willy-nilly with the resources is there in each of these traditions. Another important point, which is not the case in all religious traditions, is that the earth is created as a good. The time at which when Genesis, the narratives emerge out of the ancient Near East, there are a lot of other stories from Babylon and this sort of thing that see the earth as being created out of sort of warring gods. Right? So Marduk kills Tiamat, is the dead mother, and makes the earth out of the dead carcass. Or there are also lots of Gnostic groups, right, that see the material world as evil, and the spiritual world is good, and the point is to escape. But one thing that's interesting and common for these three traditions is that this creation is created as good. Right? The material world is good. It's not something evil to be escaped. Another thing that is common is there's a long tradition of the two books. Are you familiar with this, the two books? There's the book of nature and the book of scripture, the book of Torah, the Quran. Right? So the idea that God created this world and God can be revealed through God's works, so that you don't just know God through a book, but you can also know God by looking at God's works in creation. So I think that this really grounds all three traditions in terms of being concerned about the state of things like the Jordan River. There are also in each of these traditions sort of strong admonitions that things such as water and land are common. Right? There are redistribution laws in these texts that over a period of time, there's a jubilee year when all debts are forgiven, for instance, and the land is redistributed, this sort of thing. There are traditions that you can use water and you can use the land, but if you begin to take more than you need from others, then that's sort of a sin, or it's not a right thing to do. So there's all sorts of religious values that come out of these three traditions. I'll just give you a few sort of specific, or more specific examples. Again, religious texts, the Quran, for instance, and the Sunnah, stipulate that water is the basic need of life, place a number of obligations and responsibilities upon Muslims. The conservation of existing water supplies in the best possible way, the prevention of any activity that might lead to the pollution of water resources or spoil the purity and characteristics of the water, and never adopting an extravagant or irresponsible attitude in the consumption of water. Right? So this is a statement by Richard Foltz, who's a scholar of Islam. And this is his assessment after a long analysis of all the different passages in the Quran that talk about water and the Sunnah. So you can find these sorts of things in the Torah and the New Testament as well, or the Christian Testament. There are rituals in all three of these traditions. Here I'll focus on Sukkot, which is often thought of as the sort of harvest or agricultural, at least, festival, but it's also very much a festival that focuses on water. So Martin Yaffe, who's a scholar of Judaism, writes, Sukkot was a time for the biblical Israelites to acknowledge and praise God for the previous year's rain and subsequent abundant harvest of the agricultural year. That was now coming to a close. At the same time, it was a period that evoked their deepest hopes, concerns, and fears regarding the expected and awaited rain so necessary for a successful forthcoming agricultural cycle. Right, so there are rituals in all three traditions we could talk about, again, baptism or something like this, that focus on water as the sort of essential to life. And the sort of distinction is that the water from the sky is the gift from God. The water on the earth that gets collected in the rivers and the aquifers is the responsibility of humans. So it is the gift to be responsible for, rather than something to be taken for granted. There are also theological, if you will, symbols that deal with water. And here I'll offer one from a Christian theologian, Keller, who writes a theology based upon the watery chaos in the beginning of Genesis. Right? And her book, Face of the Deep, it's one of the first full theology of creation from the primal chaos. It proposes a creatio ex profundis, right? A creation of profundity instead of out of nothing. Right? Creation out of the watery depths, both as an alternative to the orthodox power discourse of creation from nothingness, and as a figure of the bottomless process of becoming. The Hebrew tehom, or primal chaos, already marks every beginning. So she develops throughout this book a whole theology from this watery beginning, and suggests the metaphor of water as spirit, water as the source of life, this sort of thing. So there are lots of theological, philosophical projects within each of these traditions that talk about the importance of water, the importance of the rest of the natural world in general. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going next. Okay. So on my Mac, I can have the presenter tools up, but it doesn't seem to work on here. So I don't know what the next slide is, so it surprises me every once in a while. Okay, so that brief little introduction. What I want to suggest is that the dialogue between religion and nature can offer a source of hope, right, in the Jordan River. And what I want to suggest is that I'll go through an example of when these three religions have collaborated before. And what I want to suggest now is that we are in such a paradigm shift due to globalization and global climate change that matches that of the scientific revolution. Right? And during the scientific revolution is a result of at least Jewish, Christian, and Islamic scholars. You don't get it without all three. So what I want to suggest is that there is precedence, right, for transcending religious boundaries. There is precedence for transcending quote-unquote national boundaries or empire boundaries to collaborate on projects that are global in scope. And I think that the Jordan River could be another such project. That could actually give us a lot of ideas, resources for how to address global climate change. Right? So this micro level, the Jordan River, could be a symbol, become a symbol, or provide examples of how to do interreligious global efforts to address climate change. Because right now, if you look at the negotiations on climate change, it's just as fallen apart and broken as the negotiations, the multilateral negotiations that are trying to save the Jordan River. And for many of the same reasons. Politics, power, money, even some religious animosity, this sort of thing, right? So what I want to suggest is that this could be turned into a place, a space of hope, rather than despair. And the paradigm shift that I'm going to suggest we're going through now is from the idea of a global reality, which is this sort of one Earth, and there is one way on this Earth, and the sort of the globalization that takes place of the free market capitalism or the Western culture, right? So a global idea is that you have one culture that's spread over the face of the globe, right? You have industrial agriculture in one place that gets spread over the face of the globe, rather than sort of paying attention to specific areas that might not be conducive to these types of agriculture, right? We may not need cities like Las Vegas. I know, I'm sorry. But it's a desert, right? And how much water gets diverted to this desert to make it survive, right? But this is the idea that we can just sort of transport our cultures anywhere we go, regardless of the local ecosystem, local bioregion, local resources, this sort of thing. So what I want to suggest is that we're moving from this sort of paradigm to that of the planetary. We are planetary citizens. Not a single humanity, but many different people coming together to make up this diverse community that we call planet Earth. Right? So it's a move from thinking of self in terms of, first of all, in a necessarily national, I'm American, or I am Christian, or to thinking first and foremost, I am a planetary being. Right? I'm a planetary citizen. And this paradigm shift is the result of things like globalization of transportation and communication technologies, but also the realization of something like how we affect the planet through the release of CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions, right? How we have affected the climate. We are part of this planet. We're not over and against it. We can't manage it all with one way. And this is what religion and ecology is sort of emerging dialogue has begun to do. Mary Evelyn Tucker, who is one of the, mothers of religion and ecology, she and her co-director, her husband John Grimm, started the Forum on Religion and Ecology about 20 years ago. And what she says is that religions are now entering their ecological phase, right? So that in sort of religious thinking, right, the circle of moral concern, the sort of historical trajectory of moral concern within a religion sort of expands, right? First it's me and my group, then it's like, okay, maybe it's this whole sort of area or nation, then it's all of humans, right? All humanity, that should be the locus of concern for any religion, right? But now it becomes the whole planet, right? So that religions now are entering this phase in which they see as moral concern the planet itself, and not just human beings, right? That's what she suggests. So the Forum on Religion and Ecology had this whole series of conferences that led to a series of textbooks, which are in the FIU library if you're ever interested. But there's one on Christianity and ecology, Judaism and ecology, Buddhism and ecology, Islam and ecology, so on and so forth, the major sort of world traditions. And what they did was they brought together scholars, activists, and practitioners of these religions to sort of talk about what resources does this tradition have for addressing contemporary environmental issues, and how have these religions exacerbated environmental problems, right? Because there are tenets in every religion, too, that suggest that we shouldn't care about the earth, depending on which way you read texts, which theologian or philosopher you commentary you follow, this sort of thing. There are plenty earth-denying examples in all these traditions too. So I don't mean to suggest that that religions come ready-made to be environmentalists. That's not the case, obviously. But what they've done with the 4-1 religion ecology is they focus on the extant traditions and reground them in the earth community rather than a human community. And this includes, by the way, indigenous traditions. Right? No sort of world religion was created to deal with the problem of globalization and global climate change. Right? They're all come out of axial age or prior to that. This is a new problem for humanity, regardless of what tradition you belong to. Or even if you don't belong to a tradition. But the hope is that this will mobilize religious communities for environmental action and change. One person suggested that we have what we need, right? We have about 6 billion people that consider themselves a part of one of these major traditions. You know, how much they practice, that's another story, or how much they consider themselves a part is another story. So we have the hardware, right? We have the institutions, we have the people. What we need is the right software. For these traditions, right, to create this environmental movement. And if you, this is actually catching on, so places like Greenpeace, the Sierra Club, the United Nations Environmental Program now all have components that deal with religion and the environment because they realize this could be a potential source of support for their movements. The symbols on the left there are just a few examples of organizations that are focusing on sort of religiously based environmentalism. The one in the top there is the symbol for Interfaith Power and Light, which started in California, but there's now one in, I think, 37 states. So we just started one called Sunshine State Power and Light. And what this does is it focuses on greening religious institutions, the communities. So churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, they will actually come in and do environmental audits of the building, help you put in compact fluorescents, help you reduce energy use, sometimes even put solar panels, right, help you figure out how to do this on your building, this sort of thing. The places have to sign covenants of waste reduction, this sort of thing. So that's their way of trying to address the issue. COTL, which some of you may have heard of, the Coalition on Environment and Jewish Life, has tons of children's programs, right? They have a children's camp, summer camp, where you come and learn about the environmental implications or the environmental ethics based upon Torah, and these sorts of things. They also do a lot of activism, a lot of campaigning, this sort of thing. And they also publish position pieces and this sort of thing. One of the people that's involved with this has come up with the concept of eco-kosher. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. But trying to rethink kosher, and there's also a movement for eco-halal, right? Trying to rethink these food laws in terms of what it would mean for environmental sort of food laws, right? Is it okay to sort of have kosher meat that's comes from factory farms, for instance, right? Or is it okay to have kosher foods that have pesticides and herbicides or that are genetically modified? You know, these sorts of things. This is what these concepts are trying to do, is trying to sort of give these long traditions an environmental component. And then there is the International Federation, the Islamic Federation on Environmental and Ecological Sciences, I think that's the right acronym, which is based out of the UK. They've actually done some work on the Jordan River. I'm going to talk about them a little bit later. But they focus also in Indonesia a lot on deforestation problems, but they're trying to be international. They're trying to focus on Islam and the environment sort of at a planetary level. I also just want to note that this is one branch of religion and nature. There's also another sort of branch called religious naturalism. That is people that are beginning to reread sciences like ecology, evolution, or cosmology as itself, right? A narrative, a meaning-making practice, as a spirituality. So out of some sciences, people are saying, that's all we need, is that, you know, the story of evolution can be awe-inspiring in itself. And that's, we really need these new religious naturalisms too to address the environmental problems. But I'm not going to talk about that today. Okay. So let me give you this historical example real quick, and then we'll move right along. About 10 more minutes. Is that right, okay? Yeah. You can get some cookies and move around if you need to. I understand. I sat in a lot of classes. So this is a historical example, and this is one of the reasons that I think that religion and science, or in this case, right, religion and nature, because science is supposed to be the area of inquiry that tells us about nature, have always already been intertwined. And if you look at specifically in sort of the Western sort of religious traditions, one thing that was necessary for the eventual emergence of modern science, I would argue, along with others, is some sense of a single creation, right? That abides by single laws, right? That is also good, right? Because if creation is evil and is ruled by all these many gods, then there's not going to be natural laws. You're not going to be able to observe, you're not going to be able to have causal relations between the things that you observe, because it could be tricking you, or it could just be located in this one area. So a lot of people would argue that something like monotheism and creation as being good and not evil and trying to trick us are two very necessary things for modern science to emerge. Another thing that's necessary is for there to be a God that is not equated with nature, that is transcendent. It's not very nice if your God is sort of the Mother Earth and you go about cutting up the Mother Earth or investigating the Mother Earth, which there are lots of metaphors in early modern science that suggest this, right? Because the Earth is not divine, we can sort of pry into its secrets, right, and rip out the knowledge that we need, this sort of thing. So there are a few sort of, I think, built-in theological assumptions in the three Abrahamic faiths that lead to, all different though they are, that help foster the emergence of modern science. Another important thing, so what happens, what I want to talk about is the shift from the Ptolemaic to the Copernican, but, and I'll do that through the Golden Age of Islam, but I think it's important to know, especially in something like Christian theology, right, it's always already been involved with natural philosophy, or what becomes later science. So early Christian scriptures are read through the Greek Ptolemaic universe that has the Earth at the center. Right, this becomes the reigning paradigm of the cosmological view until Copernicus. So what happens, right, in this paradigm, right? So the Earth is at the center, then you have everything revolving around it, and God is the unmoved mover outside the Aristotelian sort of model. Now for the Greeks, they were like, there's no way that the divine can come to Earth because that would mean movement, right? And movement is imperfect, leads to change and decay and these sorts of things. And so you find all of these theological acrobatics in the early, what have become the church fathers, over how God comes to Earth, right? If, we have to describe how this God is still perfect, but comes to Earth. And so you end up with the Trinity, right? And you end up with the idea of Christ having two natures in one person, right? And all of this is done in terms of because of the acrobatics they have to do to work with this Greek Ptolemaic cosmology. So already, right, these traditions get defined by the cosmology around them, and they take in what we might call science in their theological explorations. But how many of you are pretty familiar with the contributions of Islam to modern science?
What?
The contributions of Islam to modern science.
To modern science?
Yeah. So, okay, I'll spend just a little on here just to give you an idea. Yeah. So this is during the golden age of Islam, prior to the quote-unquote scientific revolution. Pardon?
So that's not modern.
No. This is like 600 to
Yeah,
what,
right.
1300, something like this. That may be a little bit late, but so again, within Islam itself, you have some important impetus for developing components of what becomes mathematics, optics, modern science that leads to sort of Copernicus and then Galileo making their predictions that then eventually lead to this paradigm shift of heliocentric universe. So you have, right, the Shahadan, the profession of the creed. Why is that important? This leads to the spread of literacy. Right? It's important that everyone be able, as the Islamic empire spreads, right, And printing is taken over from the Chinese, I think, actually, is where Islam gets the printing, the idea of printing, or the printing technology from. There we go. It's important, right, that everybody be literate so they can profess the creed. Right? Of course, not everybody's literate, but there has to be a common language. So Arabic becomes the common language. The creed of the Quran gets printed a lot and spread about. So there's, first of all, you have this vast empire that has a common language so you can travel around and share ideas, right? So this is, I think, important. Also, ritual prayer, the times of prayer and the location of Mecca. You have to be able to know what time of day it is and how to tell which direction Mecca's in, right? So you have to be able to read the stars and the sun and this sort of thing. So it leads to advances in mathematics, algebra. The pilgrimage to Mecca, right? Again, you have to know your directions. But you also the pilgrimage brings a lot of people together to share ideas along the way to the pilgrimage. So the sharing of knowledge and the development of some mathematic qualities are built into, right, the 5 pillars. Another important thing is, in order to read the stars right, you need better and better optics. So optics were developed further during the Golden Age of Islam. Again, the Quran encourages the study of nature as God's work, this 2 books tradition. This also gets later some people in trouble when, for the same reason that during the fall of Rome, people blamed, oh, it's this natural philosophy, and we've got to be, got to get rid of the Greeks and be, talk about Christianity. There's the scripture. The same sort of thing happens at the end of the Golden Age of Islam, is that as the hinterlands are being invaded and these sorts of things, natural philosophy gets blamed, and there's a rise in fundamentalism and all this sort of thing. So, but nonetheless, the Quran does encourage the study of nature as God's work.
What does almsgiving have to do with?
It's just one of the pillars. I just added it in there.
Does it relate to scientific?
It doesn't. I just included all 5 pillars to be thorough. So not all of them necessarily. But, there's also within Islam, again, the concept tawhid, the unity of the cosmos, this oneness that I think is important to articulate some sort of natural law. Also, there is an idea of the perfectibility of human nature. There's not, in the Quran, there's not this, or in Islam, there's not this concept of original sin. Right? There's an idea that humans over time are perfectible. Right? So that is, I think, an impetus, right, to continue to explore ways of betterment, this sort of thing. By the way, this is not all just off the top of my head. I promise. Other people have said these sorts of things too. And again, humans are seen as vice regents. They have a responsibility over nature. They're not just another part of the natural world, but they're sort of over and against. Now we could talk about that as both problematic and solution, but we can do that later. So again, these are some of the things that I talked about, some of the technologies during the Golden Age of Islam that were then adopted during the Latin Rebirth. So I don't want to go over those again, but just to give you some more ideas, the medicine, abdominal surgery, cataract removal, algebra, mental illness, optics, medical schools, pharmaceuticals, right? All these things were developed in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad and other mosques that kind of became more like universities, right? These sciences were further developed. Also, from alchemy, chemistry and pharmacology began to emerge, right? Or the early roots of did. And these are just some of the technological developments. One that I think is really pretty awesome in terms of the optics that were available at the time is Al-Biruni's calculus of the radius of the Earth, which, as you can see, is pretty close to what we think it is today. The first lab manual is developed basically during this time. Another medical manual that draws off Galen's is developed by Ibn Sina becomes very important for modern medicine later. Again, optics, these sorts of things. I just want to skip through this really quick. So what happens then in the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries is a similar thing that happened during the 4th century to the Roman Empire, that there are Western Crusades, Mongolian invasions, and people begin to lay the blame. This is happening because you've fallen too far off into natural philosophy and haven't followed the Quran enough, so there's a rise of fundamentalism. People are playing the blame game, this sort of thing. At the same time, right, you have, at this time, the expelling of Muslims and Jews from southern Spain, right, by the sort of Christian Spain. So you have the end of the convivencia, right, which you have this rich period of interchange between Muslim Jews and Christians in southern Spain. Again, why? At the same time that you have this expulsion, right, you have also the beginnings of colonization by Spain. And so I would argue that what goes on there is the attempt to solidify an identity. Right? We want a single identity. We are a Christian Spain, and we are taking our story, right, on into this this other world, right, where it's the continuation of the sort of Christian narrative. Now, what happens, right, is that Latins begin to, through Arabic, get back to the Greeks, and began to, the centers of universities and science become more associated with monasteries and universities in the sort of Christian West. And so this whole period of Islam, right, and the Western narrative gets covered over as the Dark Ages, right, when nothing was happening. You'll still hear scholars today suggest that the only thing that happened to Greek natural philosophy during the Golden Age of Islam is that they translated it. They didn't add to it. Right? And this is, you still hear people say this. But this was, I think, a rhetorical attempt, right, to lay claim to natural philosophy on the one hand, right, and the sort of ancient Near East religious traditions of monotheism on the other, by sort of expelling other identities other than Christian and laying hold to the Greeks. Right? So then you have these two foundations, these two pillars for expansion of empire. Any of that, we can discuss the ins and outs of that a little bit more. So now we have a similar paradigm shift, right, that's happening, I think, as that happened with the Copernican revolution, right, when everybody had to, or began to rethink, oh, well, if we're not at the center of the universe anymore, what does that mean for our religious traditions that are built upon this idea that we are at the center of the salvation history, of a story, of God's creation, this sort of thing. Another displacement, I think, is happening with global climate change, right? And what's happening is that we're trying to replace ourselves in a post-industrial era. We're trying to rethink what it means to be human after industrialization. What is nature after the Industrial Revolution, this sort of thing. There is no more romantic nature to return to or preserve or conserve, right? Everything is affected by global climate change. And again, no extant philosophical religious tradition was developed to address this problem. There's also a lot of new things in terms of thinking about, what it means to be human, right? So many of you might remember this image from the Apollo, the 1968 Apollo mission. This is the first image of the Earth from outer space, the little blue ball, right? This has only been in our consciousness for 40 years. That's relatively new. To think of all of these histories, all of these civilizations, all of these different religions existing on this one little planet, right? That's something new that I think that we're still trying to digest. Other things there I'm not going to get into. In terms of this idea that we all exist on this one planet, right? But there are multiple truth claims, right? So what does this mean? Right? Does truth still mean universal in the sense of our truth is the truth from 14.5 billion years ago all the way to the present? Or perhaps there are multiple truths, right? Multiple ways of living in the world that can be true, right? You can live truthfully from a lot of different ways. There may not be necessarily have to be one single truth. So this is a problem, I think, for religious traditions, right? How do we describe our truth claims when we now are globalized? We know that there are all these other traditions. We know that the cosmos is 14.5 billion years old, right? And not just like 6,000 or so. So another thing that happens, I think, with the joint sort of globalization and global climate change is, in global climate change, what does it mean to hope now? If our climate is already going to change to some extent, we don't know how, we don't know how much, what does it mean to hope for a better planet for the future, for future generations? Again, what happens to meaning when there are so many different sources of meaning? Is it universal? Is it localized? Are there multiple meanings? This sort of thing. I think one of the things that is helpful in the religion and ecology dialogue, religion and nature, is that there's a certain amount of agnosticism that enters the picture about the future, right? And you find this tradition, I think, in most religious traditions, of not knowing, right? The point of hope, the opposite of hope is, the opposite of faith is despair. The opposite of hope is certainty. Certainty, yeah. So there is, within most traditions, there is admonition against certainty, right? There is some point at which religions begin to deconstruct your knowing, whether it's through something like negative theology or koans or mystery or something like this. Because when we think that we know, we begin to enact that knowledge in the world regardless of how it affects others, this sort of thing. And so there's a certain, I think, amount of agnosticism that religions can contribute to this sort of what we might hope for, what we might work towards in the future. And let me just suggest here that the Jordan is a perfect example of this type of new planetary.
I was waiting for you to get back to
Sorry, it's a long circle, but here we are. It's a perfect example of this type of emerging planetary ethic. It shares some of the same problems, right? It's a transnational problem. It's an interreligious problem. There are multiple claims on the river, yet there is one river, just like there is one Earth, right? It's a similar sort of problem to something like global climate change. That's going to take this multi-collaboration, I think. So what we need then, I think, and what religions can help us develop is an Earth ethics and a planetary identity, rather than sort of national solutions and borders. We have to stop thinking in national solutions and borders because the Earth is not set up that way, right? And religions, right, are transnational. They're ecosystemic. They exist in many different areas of the world, this sort of thing. A few notes of hope. So there are several organizations that have recognized the power of religion to address these problems, and that specifically are focusing on the Jordan River, on bringing different religious identities together. This is what the film started out with. The film we started out with is from this organization called Friends of the Earth. So they have, one of their whole missions, right, is on the Jordan River to bring, they have a specific, let me see if I can find it. They have a specific, actually, I put it here, religious component to it. So they're not just talking about policy and sort of governmental things, but they're talking about culture, to promote cultural events such as festivals and concerts in the old Roman amphitheaters and other sites, prepare a business plan for a regional museum, improve and promote the baptism sites on all sides of the Jordan River based on the model of Yardenit in Israel, and promote pilgrimage to the shrines of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, right? So they're specifically trying to include some of these religious roots in their efforts. And I think that is going to be essential because whether we like it or not, religions still lay claim to our symbolic daily structures. to a large portion of people's daily lives. Again, there is the Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environmental Sciences, which is based in the UK, and they don't solely focus on the Jordan River, but that is one of their projects. They have this Great Green Moss program, which is kind of like the Sunshine State Interfaith Power and Light model that I talked about earlier, trying to green the actual physical architecture. Okay, yes, close all tabs. And then there is another one, Zalul, Israel's Environmental Association, and they have very recently started a project on the Jordan River. They've been focused mostly on saving beaches in Israel, but now they've started, there's nothing even on their website yet. They have a website called SaveTheJordan.org, which the domain name they lost in November, so now they're trying to regroup and find another domain because somebody else bought it up. But nonetheless, they've started a project. They've gotten some funding from the Israeli government and also from the UK to specifically focus on the Jordan River and to specifically include religious communities in those efforts. So just as sort of multi-religious efforts go to sort of food relief and sort of rebuilding homes that are destroyed, so here they're trying to do a multi-religious effort in terms of saving the Jordan River. And if the Jordan River, if this area, right, can come together to set up a covenant, right, to protect the Jordan River, then to me, that becomes a symbol of hope for the future of humanity in addressing a problem like global climate change. So that's all I have to say. Sorry that was long-winded. But let me please ask questions and this sort of thing now.
We have about 10 minutes for questions, so please, Whitney, if you don't mind calling on whoever you want.
Sure. Go ahead.
You talked a great deal about religion and water. By any chance, do you have any personal feelings about what's going on with the French as far as the water, fresh water on this world? As they control more of the fresh water that is presently existing.
I don't know that I'm familiar specifically with the French. Are you talking about like a private corporation in France or the French government?
Corporations.
Oh, corporations, yes. For sure. No, this is a huge problem. Have you ever watched the documentary Thirst? There's a documentary, Thirst, that addresses exactly this problem. And they look at 3 different communities. They don't specifically talk about a French corporation, but they talk about a British corporation, the Thames. They talk about Bechtel, which owns a lot of municipal water systems in sort of the 2/3 world. And they also, so they focus on this. And Coca-Cola in India is another one, right? Dasani water. By Coca-Cola. A lot of that water comes from groundwater in India, right? And it's shipped. And what happens is that they dig these huge wells and they start sucking up the water out of the aquifers. And then villagers have to walk further and further because their wells go dry. And these are usually women in these outlying villages. And when they have to walk further and further, they want help. So who do they enlist? Their daughters, right? Because they can't take their sons out of school, so they take their daughters out of school, which leads to all sorts of cycles of poverty and sexism and these sorts of things. So it's a huge intertwined issue with water and the privatization of water that's going on. Yeah, I recommend that documentary.
And it's upon us right now.
Right.
Yes. You seem to indicate that a great part of the problem was the sewage flowing into the Jordan River. And from what I can gather, if you can solve that, then you can have water a lot purer and a lot easier, and all religions could then partake of whatever they need. So it would seem to me that the big problem is to stop the big corporations from dumping their garbage in the rivers, and what to do with all the sewage and garbage if you're not going to dump it into the river. is anybody dealing with this?
It's
Just
usually, it's
going around.
municipalities that are dumping waste.
What?
It's municipalities that are dumping wastewaters,
Well, the
right?
companies are too.
Right. But for the Jordan though, that's part of the pollution problem. But part of the overall water scarcity problem is the diversion of 70%, right, of the water for agriculture. So that's the larger problem to deal with, and that brings up the huge questions, right? This is where the sort of rubber meets the road. If you're a farmer, right, that's been growing mangoes and all these sort of water intensive crops for so long. This happens in the U.S. too. Then you're being asked to change your way of life, right? And that's never an easy thing to sell. So this is, I mean, I think that's the sewage treatment, I think, could be the easier side to solve.
It's a good way to start.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you've got a real paradigm problem here. You've got a paradigm. You've got to do a really great shift here. Because you're looking at this, and the farmer's using water, and the farmer's diverting the water, and the pollution coming out of the farms. And you're looking at it as a religious thing and a political thing. This farmer isn't a religious fanatic. Very few farmers are. They're not fundamentalists. They're not sitting there farming during the day and doing their politics at night. They're not forming work groups. What they want to do is they want to raise their crops, they want to make a living, they want to sell their crops. Now, if you're going to go over there and have a task force, he doesn't give a damn about your task force, and he never will. And you're not going to do a thing. If you want to do something with a farmer, you go to the farmer. You say, listen, this is a situation we have, this is a situation you have. The man is an environmentalist. All farmers are environmentalists. That's how they live in the future, and they know that. You lose the environment, you lose your farm. They're willing to go along with you. Okay, this is a better way to conserve water, or to bring it back, or to reuse it. And you go farmer to farmer. And don't worry about the religion, and don't worry about the country, and don't worry about whether it's global warming or not, because we have global change. We've been having it for 4 billion years, and it's not going to stop changing now. You're worried about a carbon footprint. When you have agriculture, you're losing carbon. Plants are absorbing the carbon. So you're not getting a carbon footprint. Go to the farmer, come up with a good idea, and we've got thousands of them. Have him work with you. He will work with you if you show it's to his benefit. And you do it farm by farm, and everything is straight. It's fixed up.
This is, I agree to a certain extent. However, the farmers have, I grew up in a farming family in Arkansas, rice farming, and watched the family farm, watch my father and grandfather sell out the family farm to industrial agriculture. The amount of pressure that is on farmers to industrialize or sell their farms is overwhelming. Farmers don't necessarily have that much decision power anymore, because the choice is you adopt these technologies so you get higher yield, you spray with these things so you get a higher yield, or because there are other people doing it, which drives the price of the crop down, and if you don't do the same, you won't be able to keep up and you'll have to sell. So there are huge economic forces, and yes, there are sort of political issues, there are economic issues that go along with this too. All I'm suggesting is that religions, right, I think can provide a useful groundswell for political rhetoric in terms of convincing people that this problem transcends, right, any sort of personal, national, even religious identity-based solution, right? It transcends like any one interest for the interests of the whole area and the future of the river.
Well, that's real nice, and it sounds great. And he gets up in the morning, he's going to want to grow his crops again.
Of course.
Okay, he's not going to worry about your philosophy. He's not a
Right,
philosopher.
and neither is Shell Oil going to worry about
And
funding
Shell Oil's
governments
not
in
causing the
Nigeria to
problem.
kill.
Agriculture is.
No, but neither is Shell Oil is not going to care about funding governments to shoot people so they can continue to drill in Nigeria. But nonetheless, when you educate other people about that, it kind of makes them mad, right? And you start a political movement. For instance, the Bishop of Alaska went with a delegation of Gwich'in people, which is the local community there in the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge, because all Gwich'in are also Anglican. This is the way colonization worked. And they went to BP headquarters, and they convinced BP to divest all of their interests in the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge. Now, you can say, you know, sure, they're not only going to do what's in their economic interest, but I think that there is a level at which this type of politics that includes the religious symbolic can be helpful in coming to solutions. Now, of course, BP just had a huge oil spill, this sort of thing, but nonetheless, there are these small victories.
Let's take one more question, and
getting back to the very beginning, there's been a long-standing movement to try to use, I don't know, I say technocrats or scientists, but to use the things which the scientific world can agree upon much more easily than the political world, to try to be a bridge between these states. So there's been a lot of hope that maybe these international bodies that have scientists and engineers and other on that deal with water resources in the region can be sort of, if you can get those kind of agreements going, which they have, you kind of have a bridge. You build something which can lead to further cooperation. So what I thought I saw when you were talking about it in the beginning, I thought I saw you going a little bit further to use the notion that, well, now we need to actually have religious cooperation to solve these kinds of problems. But I think that in a way, the people, the commonality among these religious groups is that they all care about the environment, and they also come back then to that scientific and technical way of thinking about the Earth, because they've been trained to understand the Earth in that way. So I think that the people who lead those organizations are actually coming back full circle to the original idea that we really do have problems, have to be solved. I mean, the fact that the entire world scientific community understands global climate change and that humans are involved in it, every academy of sciences in the world understands this, means that this is something the scientific community agrees upon. And so I think can the environmental community. So maybe it would be that you're not really leaving, you're not really bringing religion in as much as you're bringing people of different religions who have those scientific backgrounds. And maybe that would percolate up into the religion from there, you know, sort of from a different level.
I agree with you. However, I would add that sort of in a post-enlightenment way, information doesn't lead to change, right? You know, if it did, then Al Gore's movie would convince everybody, and there would be a huge groundswell to address global climate change right now at the UN, right? Because there's more, all the information is there, right, the evidence. And like you said, there is scientific agreement, and science does, I think, provide neutral grounds for people to come to the table. But at the end of the day, we have to deal with these issues, right? Issues of lifestyle changes, existential issues, issues of greed, issues of power. And it's these sorts of things that I think, you know, religions have traditionally tried to deal with. And I think that has to be included somehow, right? So there has to be issues of value, hope, you know, greed, sin, even, you know, in there maybe. But retribution, these sorts of things I think have to be included. It can't all just be sort of, you know, the science says this, so we have to do this, because people aren't persuaded necessarily just by information. I wish that was that easy, but.
You're welcome to stay. I just wanted to give, we're at the 3:30 mark, and I just wanted to give those who need to go an opportunity, but I'm sure Dr. Bauman can stay with us. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very thankful for Dr. Whitney Bauman for joining us and giving us such a wonderful lecture. Thank you. As you go out, right by the coffee, please take another cup of coffee. Don't be shy, and some more cookies. We have more. There is not only the brochure, if you don't have one, but this generic flyer. Our co-organizers are now creating a very snazzy flyer. We'll have it on Monday. The Israel Summit, which is going to be taking place on January 16th. It's a Sunday. It's going to be at Parajungle Island. And we're featuring some U.S. Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, keynotes by Israel Ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Michael Oren, that is the Israeli Ambassador to the United States, Canadian Minister of Parliament Erwin Cutler, and Natan Sharansky, who you know very well, as well as additional dignitaries. These will be about workshops, speeches.
About what?
Basically, it's about the issue of the effort. You know, there's a lot of efforts now. The whole issue of the delegitimization of Israel, and this is an event that's being done by the JCRC, by the Anti-Defamation League, Middle East Society, as well as the Judaic Studies Program under SIPA. The School of International Public Affairs is also joining forces with this initiative, but the short name of it is Israel Summit. I could have added the whole line on it, but I wanted to keep it short and simple.
You mentioned who's going to be there.
Right.
Not what it's about.
It's, again, various speeches about the issues of, yeah. Okay, and there are also going to be workshops to students, so students will also be there as well. But this is open to the community. There is an admission charge, a small $18, but it includes breakfast. Yes, you know, come on, right? It includes breakfast. And it's at 9 a.m., okay, till 1 p.m. But you'll get emails from us, and you'll see a much more snazzier email and a snazzier flyer, but I wanted to make something for today. And again, thank you to Dr. Bauman.
I want to ask him about his technology.
Should we ask? This is what Richie, this is what Mara asked.
Bye-bye.
From here?
Yeah.
Careful. Okay, listen.
Give it to an arrow.
No, I'm having Hanukkah.
But the last time that there is, we're bringing it back to Jordan.
How is it working? What do you mean?
Okay, I used to do teacher training.